Hey, it's Oxi, and in this video we are taking a look at the CV and gate functions in the Oxi One MkII. Now in the Oxi One you have 8 CV outputs, 8 gate outputs, and a clock output here. Now you can also run external CV into the modulation input on the Oxi One, but we will be focusing on the CV and gate outputs in this video. So right now I'm running my CV, gate and clock outputs through this HDMI mini connector here into the OXI Pipe Mark I in my Eurorack system. So all this does is that it replicates the CV, gate and clock outputs here. It also sends a reset out. So you can basically you have all the same functions whether you use the pipe or you use the outputs on the unit itself. So the first thing we'll do in this video is CV and gate sequencing with a mono sequencer, CV sending volt per octave to the oscillator volt per octave input, and gate is sending a gate to my the envelope generator. Now we'll start by pressing play. And nothing is happening. You have to assign your outputs here. So we'll hold Shift and press the Gen and CV gate button here to get to the CV and gate matrix. Now what you're seeing here is an empty grid, and the way this works is that you basically have your 8 CV outputs here on these 8 columns here, and your gate outputs here on these 8 columns. And your sequencers are here, of course. So let's say we want to assign sequencer 1 to output volt per octave in CV output 1. So we'll just tap that, it's activated. And now we are sending volt per octave, but we still need a gate. So we'll tap this one. And now we have volt per octave and gate. Okay, for the settings in the CV output here, when you are set to pitch, you basically can choose your voice. If you have a polyphonic sequencer, you can offset your sequence here by half steps. And go very high or very low. And you also have different formats here for your volt per octave. So this will sound very off if you're using these with volt per octave inputs. Okay, now for your basic trigger gate setting here, or type, you have your voice setting again. So if you want to trigger a certain voice, you can choose that here in a polyphonic sequencer type. And you can choose your mode, so V trigger or S trig. S trig is basically the reverse of V trig, which is used by some gear out there, but more usual in Eurorack is V trig. Okay, I think my sequence here is a little bit boring, so I want to add a bit of delay from C legs, and you can hear that it's not synced to tempo. So we can basically take a clock output from the dedicated clock out and send it to the clock input in whatever module you're using. And I have it set in the settings for 16th note clock. Now we're getting a 16th note clock. But what we can do is we can take a gate output, I'll be using gate output 8 here, assign the gate here, change the type to clock. So now we have another possible clock source in the Oxi One MkII. We can use any gate output for a clock. Now what you can do with this is you can change the rate of the clock here. So we can go for 16-note triplets, 30-second notes, 30-second note triplets, or you can slower 8-note triplets, 8th notes, quarter notes, half note, 1 bar. Okay, next we will take a look at some of the modulation options in CV outputs here. So right now I have CV output 2 patched into the morph input in mutable instruments plots. And now we will assign CV2 to sequencer 1 and change the type to velocity. Now I press play and nothing is happening. We will go here to velocity and draw a velocity curve here. And as you can hear, we're getting modulation based on velocity. And what we can also do is go into the random form here and randomize the velocity. Now for velocity CV, we have one option here, which is gated. So you can choose whether it's gated off or gated on. So if gated is off, you get that behavior we just heard, where the velocity value will be sent through the CV until it receives a new value. Now if you set it to on, this CV output will send the velocity value voltage only for as long as the note is held. So let's try this. And we'll go back to gated off and on. That makes for some interesting velocity modulation. Now you can send an LFO through the CV input, so you can use an LFO in the Oxi One for CV modulation. Now for this we'll set to type the type to LFO1 here and press play. Now we'll go into the LFO menu and set the LFO1 amount here. We'll crank that. So as you can hear, we are getting some LFO modulation through CV. Now we can go here and basically we can increase the range by setting the offset to negative values here. So as you can see here, it lights up red. So we're getting some negative values as well as positive values. When we set that back to 0, we only get positive values. And you can go higher as well. So basically be constantly higher. And back to 0. And you can use all the different LFO waveforms here. You can change the rate. And another modulation source for CV is your modulation lane. So basically you have types from modulation 1 to modulation 8, so you can use all your modulation lanes for CV modulation. And what we'll do now is set the type to mod 1, go into our mod matrix here, and we have our mod 1, which is mod wheel, selected, and we will draw a curve here. Just go like this, and then we'll press play. So basically you can just draw your own velocity curve here. Okay, now we have one more CV type in the Oxi One, which is track envelope. What this does is it basically sends an envelope signal from the CV output. So right now I have replaced my envelope generator in the Eurorack system with the CV output 2 from the Oxi One. And that is running straight into the CV input in my IntelliGel Quad PCA here. And let's press play. Now the amplitude of the voltage is set by the velocity of the notes. So you get a higher velocity, the higher your velocity is. A higher voltage, the higher your velocity is. Now gate will affect decay and release. So to get a snappier envelope, you'll want a shorter gate. And in the CV matrix, you can also set your attack time here, as well as your sustain. Okay, we still have a few gate types we have not tried yet. So we'll assign gate to gate output 2 here, and we'll change the type to accent. Now what accent does is it basically sends a high gate when your velocity reaches or exceeds the threshold you set here. And it will send a low gate when your velocity is lower than the threshold. So right now I have this gate output plugged into the morph input in mutable plats, so it will change the wave shape or the wave form there. So we'll press play. And we'll change our velocity here, global velocity, to below the threshold. And we'll draw a threshold curve. So these notes here exceed the threshold, so it will send a high gate. And we get this modulation here. Okay, we have one more gate type in the Oxi One MkII, which is called threshold. Now the way this differs from accent is that the source is an LFO or a mod lane. And again, the threshold sets the value at which the gate is high or low. So let's try this with an LFO. I have my LFO 1 set to square, rate to half bar, and amount to 100, and we should be getting some modulation here. So the same as before, when the value is above the threshold, you get a high gate, and it's below the threshold, you get a low gate. So some interesting modulation options here, or ways to trigger things in your rack system. Okay, another thing you can do with the Oxi One is to use it as a MIDI-to-CV converter. So basically, you can play your rack system with, for example, a MIDI keyboard. Now you have to be sending MIDI on the same channel as your sequencer is set to. So we have our sequencer set to 11, and my keyboard is sending MIDI on channel 11, and I have my assignments here, and we'll just play here. So when playing your keyboard, you can still use the modulation options here. Now I have the CV2 set to mod 1, which is my mod wheel, and I have to press play so that it will send the CV. So press play, and I'll play here, and I'll use my mod wheel for modulation. So the Oxi One makes for a pretty good MIDI-to-CV converter here. Okay, that's it for the basics of CV and gate sequencing on the Oxi One MkII. Now, if you found this video useful, I hope you'll like and subscribe, and I will see you again very soon.